Welcome to the Don't Die Rusty podcast. I'm Rick Hansen, and we will be talking about living, not dying. We're all in this adventure together, and we will be interviewing people who inspire us to live our best lives. People with various backgrounds who will walk us down the trails they took to not die rusty. Adventure in life are many things to many people. It could be a sprint or an endurance race, but with each adventure, we become a better version of us. We hope you keep chasing those dreams, being the best you, and of course, don't die rusty. Well, hello, Don't Die Rusty Nation. I'm here today without Ricky Bruley, but I'm here today with Mina Bonhorst. She has a story that is unbelievable, and it is inspiring, and it is something that actually my sister Deb had told me that you need to talk to Mina because her story is amazing and she inspired her. And I said, well, let's get a hold of each other. As many of you know out there, my technological ineptness we did one episode before.
We did.
And there's like a 20-second delay, and it was just a hard conversation to have. So this time we are in person.
Yes.
And we're going to have a great conversation.
We are.
This is what it's all about. And I'm gonna start off by kind of introducing you, and then let's tell your story.
That sounds good.
So it'd been a little over a year ago now.
Yep.
Your son was in a vehicle wreck?
Yep, a UTV accident.
And it wasn't a good deal.
It was not.
The story that I want to talk about is how you handled the whole situation to believe and have faith and to push forward when people are telling you not to.
Right.
This is a story that, I mean, talking to you before, I have a little heads up here for myself, but
Right.
It was quite a story. So I'm going to let you tell a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into what has inspired a lot of people.
So I'm Mina. I'm a probation officer in Minnehaha County.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, I was in Hughes County, Stanley County.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a mom. I'm a grandma. I love music. I actually went to college out here in Spearfish. So.
And that's where we both have ties, because I went
Yep.
to college out here at Spearfish. This was what kept me here.
Yeah.
You know,
it's beautiful out here. I love the hills.
It's a wonderful place to be. It is. I don't really want to say that real loud because more people coming in.
Yeah.
But it is. It's actually a very active, and it's a very great community, clean, and it's just nice to be here in the Black Hills.
So I've been living in Fort Pierre. I have 3 kids, four grandchildren. My daughter Whitney, Taylor's my middle son, and then Jackson is my youngest son.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll just get into it. So
Yeah.
Jackson just graduated from high school in 2023 in May. He was going to SDSU, and I didn't even know he wanted to go to school.
Yeah.
He just kind of threw that at us one day. And then he got accepted to SDSU. We dropped him off, and that first weekend was his birthday weekend, so we knew he wasn't going to come home. And that second weekend was Labor Day weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I figured he was going to come home, but he's like, no, I'm going to hang out here, and he want to go to the state fair. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then I said, well, can you come home next weekend? Because it's your nephew's birthday.
Yep.
So he came home for that.
Yeah.
So we were excited, for him. And I was so nervous about him driving from Brookings to Fort Pierre. Because I was like, text me when you leave.
Yeah.
Of course he didn't text me when he left. He didn't. So I had to call him. I'm like, where are you at? So when he finally got home, I was just like relieved that, okay, he made it. Because he's a horrible driver. So he walked in and it was great to see him.
Well, I'm going to go from the son's perspective.
Okay.
Okay. Because I want to add a little bit to this too, because I understand the son's perspective. We were talking earlier. I went to Australia and lived there. And when I finally got to Perth, I was supposed to call my parents. I didn't call my parents for 2 weeks after I left.
I would have been livid.
You know what I mean?
Livid. And just, yeah.
So
cool,
I understand.
That's not cool.
I know it isn't. I'm lucky I had the mother I had,
Yeah. Yeah. So that evening, he came home and we made spaghetti for him because I was like, it was his favorite thing to eat. And then for several years I've had a part-time job at the airport. So I went out to the airport, did my job, and came back, and he said he was heading out to go see some friends, and I said okay.
Yep.
And then I actually was busy because I was getting ready to go on a trip myself with a girlfriend. So I stayed up late, did his laundry because he brought a big bag of laundry home, and then did mine and was getting packed, and it was probably about 12:30, quarter to 1 before I went to bed. He wasn't there, and I wasn't worried about it. And then I actually had to go be back at the airport at 6:30. So I'm like, I need to get to bed.
Yep.
And then my phone rang about 3-ish. And I heard somebody. I remember looking at the phone because with probation, you're always on call. So I look over and I don't recognize the number. So I assumed it was a PD cell number. And I heard something. I heard my name, and I heard something about hospital. And I remember saying, I don't do that. I just figured someone I was supervising.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
And at some point, I hang up on this person.
Yeah.
And they call back, and I go, who is this?
Yeah.
And then he said his name, it's Travis. And then I said, Travis who? And he said his last name.
Yep.
And then he had mentioned there was an accident and that Jackson may have been a part of it. And it made no sense. Absolutely made no sense. So I was like, I need to make some phone calls. So I hang up and I called dispatch because I went down to Jackson's room when I'm on the phone with Travis, and I'm like, oh, he's not here.
Yeah.
He's not here. So I called dispatch and I said, hey, this is Mina with Court Services. Has there been an accident? And was Jackson involved? And they said that there had been an accident in Stanley County, but they knew nothing about anybody. So I said, okay. So then Robert goes out looking for Jackson. And then this Travis calls back again. And he goes, you really need to get to the hospital. And I said, Robert's out looking for Jackson. And then Robert calls me and says, I just saw Jackson's Jeep. But I'm like, well, there we go.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, no, it's not. So we did that. And twice he thought he saw Jackson. Yeah. And then so I'm trying to do the whole Snapchat thing and trying to get in touch with Jackson. And Robert decides just to go to the hospital. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. Yeah. So I'm like, we have somebody telling us to go to the hospital. Yeah. So Robert went over there and he said, hey, do you have a Jackson Robinalt here? And they said, no, we don't. So, and he can see different people that we know. And then so he's talking with somebody and he leaves. And right at that moment, when he gets outside, that attendant at the desk comes out and says, did you say Jackson Robinalt? He said, yes. And she goes, he's on his way. So then Robert calls me and we were in a whirlwind.
And that's one of the calls that parents don't want to have.
Yeah, because I had no idea. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea why he was being taken to the hospital. So then I find out, because the first thing they hand me his wallet, they hand me his phone, and I have no idea what's going on. I see one of my friends, Rick. He's one of the volunteers, fire department, and he went, look at me. And I knew something was bad. Because when I remember looking in the bag, it was the clothes that had been cut off Jackson. So, but I was told that he was in an accident, that they were trying to get him stable. So that it just seemed, it was chaotic, but it was slow. I mean, like I could see law enforcement that I knew, and I could tell by the way they were looking at me that it wasn't good. And then when I finally got to see him, because they said he has a head injury, so I'm expecting Jackson's face or his head to be caved in. Yeah, that's what I'm expecting. So when I walk into the room, I just see doctors and nurses and people working on him because they wanted me to go see him because I wanted to see him because they were going to fly him to Sioux Falls. So when I get in the room, I just remember feeling relieved because his face, my baby's face was still intact, but there was so much blood. I mean, on one side of his face and then the other side, and he had this huge just black. I mean, it was black, purple eye, and he was just lifeless. I mean, so I remember asking if I could fly with Jackson, and they said no. And that EMT was really good. One of the not pilot, but the air EMT. He just said no, he's too sick.
Yeah.
He said, but get home, get whatever you need, and get there. So, and that's what we did. And I remember getting to the house. I remember unloading the dishwasher, and I remember just like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah.
I even called my airport manager to say, hey, I'm not going to be at my shift. So yeah, so I called and had someone cover my shift, and then the next thing to know, we were driving.
Because I think, first of all, I want to get, this was only like a year and 3 months ago?
This was September 9th, 2023.
So about a year and 2 months ago then.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's still fresh.
Yeah, I just want to tell our audience, it hasn't been a long time.
Yeah, no.
And the other thing is, I think sometimes we go into like, I don't know if it's a shock mode or if it's because I know I've been in not in those that bad of a situation, but it's like you said, taking the dishes out of the dishwasher. It's like you're trying to decipher things, I guess. I don't know, but I understand that situation and that aspect. It's like maybe you didn't want to know that or something, but you got to get going.
Yeah, because at some point between Pierre and Fort Pierre, I was like, I was adamant. I'm driving. Yeah. I'm driving by myself.
Yeah,
and then I can't stop crying.
Yeah,
I can't. I mean, I need to make it to Sioux Falls. So I don't know if Robert finally talked me into riding with me.
Yeah.
So so then that's when I start letting people know, just texting my sisters and, before, because I did call my mom right away. And then, texting my sisters and then around Mitchell, that EMT called me. He's like, where are you at? And I said, we're in Mitchell. Because and I was keeping track of Jackson's flight on FlightAware. So I knew that they had landed. He said, we're at the hospital. He's like, you need to get here, because that's when he said they had to give him like 3 units of blood. So, and that was concerning. And they had no idea what was broken. So when we get there, and like I said, I don't even know who's involved in this accident. I have no idea. So, and we'd found out before we left that one of that there was a fatality, but they didn't know who it was. But so when we get to the hospital, I just told Robert, just drop me off. And then, of course, we're at the wrong entrance, So I'm running around Avera and Sioux Falls and pick up a phone. And I said, I'm here. My son's in the ER. And then I hear somebody say, she's here to talk to me. I turn around, and it was a doctor. And he takes me in those small, pink rooms and just tells me, what Jackson's injuries are. And he's like, he's very critical ill. Is how he said it. Very critical. And then that's when I learned that he had, he said the way he said it was not, I guess, weird at the time, but I mean, he just said, he has a brain injury. And then he said, he had collapsed lung because he broke some ribs. Then he said, and his neck is broken. And that's when I don't know what it was about that. The brain injury didn't make me cry, and the cracked ribs, but when I heard his neck was broken, that's what made me just start crying. And he said, that's the least of his worries. And I said, oh. So, and then it was, they said, you can see him. They were still finishing things up with him, and we finally get to see him. And that's when, then it was just, that's when he's been incubated. So he's on the respirator, tubes coming out. And it was not, the last time I saw the kid, he was sitting in his room eating a bowl of spaghetti.
Ain't that crazy?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how fast things happen. And sometimes we don't realize how fast things happen.
Yeah.
And like I was telling you before, that's kind of where we've been going with Don't Die Rusty is like live every day because you don't know, and tell the people that are close to you that you love them because you don't know because things happen that fast.
Yeah.
And this is reality right here.
Yeah. It was just surreal. I was just like, is this really happening?
So I hope I'm never in this situation, but I don't have kids, so I'll never be in that situation.
Sure.
But what I'm saying is, I'm trying to learn here. So did they just stabilize him in Pier and know that he needed to go to Sioux Falls?
Yes. So when I walked back into the ER of Pier, and there was so many people around Jackson, but I could hear somebody's voice like being projected when they were talking to Sioux Falls.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's like, you need to get him now.
Mm-hmm.
You need to get him here now. So that's what happened.
Yeah. You never know. I mean, they know that the injuries are bad, but you didn't know until you got to Sioux Falls how bad they were.
How bad they were.
And then, so the doctors take you into the room, and then he was injured, and then you're talking to the doctors.
Yep. And it's, just so because of his lung damage and his inability to breathe on his own, they were using this nitric oxide with his breathing. So they had to wean him off that to do an MRI, and that took a while. Because as soon as they would start to bring it down, it was scary to watch, because then it was like he couldn't breathe and his heart rate was up, or then it would drop, and then he had a fever, and they were packing him with ice, and it was just that first few days just to get an MRI, that was exhausting. So, and I remember when they came into his EEG just to see about brain activity, and we're watching it. And of course, no one ever says anything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they won't tell you anything. And then finally, they were like, "Okay, yep, he has brain activity." So I was like, good. So he's not brain dead. So then finally, they get him off the nitric oxide. They're able to do the MRI, and that's when they tell us. And for some reason, I get to the room, and then I had missed the doctor, and I'm like, "Are you?" He already did his rounds. And we got some very important information we want to hear.
Yeah.
So I was sitting there with Jackson, and then the doctor came. Then they must have called him and said, she's here. So they told me that he was not going to recover, that his brain damage was severe, that he had lack of oxygen, that he had 2 to 3 strokes, and just the impact of this crash. He said those things. So the impact, the strokes, and then just the lack of oxygen, that they said he's not going to recover from this. He is not going to recover.
Recover as...
He is not going to wake up.
Oh, really?
He's in a vegetated state, and this is how your son is going to remain. And of course, this is coming from a doctor. So I'm like, and he was, do you have any questions? And I'm like, I have 1,000, but I don't know how to ask. I don't even know what to ask right now. So so he just said, hold your son's hand and be with him. And then Robert walks in, and I'm like, you just missed the worst conversation I've ever had. So then I relay it to Robert, and it was just awful. We call family, we call everybody. We even call that doctor again. I said, are you sure? Are you sure? And he sits down, and he's like, yes, this is. So then we go through that, and I'm like, I'm a visual person. I want to see these scans. I'm like, you need to show me. And when you show me the scans, let me know what that means, though. You're saying that he's so severely damaged, his brain is. So they bring in the neurology team. They put his scans up, and they said this red part, which was pretty much his entire brain, is damaged. Left, right, and front. And then they go through each one, said, if he wakes up, he'll likely never breathe on his own. And then they say, if he wakes up, this affects his vision, so he's probably going to be blind. This affects his hearing, so he's probably going to be deaf. He's not going to be able to speak. He's never going to be able to control his just bodily functions. He's never going to walk. I mean, this state that your son is in, this vegetated state, this is how he's going to be.
So here's a deal. We I don't know if do you know Jerry Norton? Have you heard of Jerry Norton? He's a world champion bullfighter. In '98, he's from actually the winter Clome.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He's in Clome. He's the school counselor at Clome. But we had a conversation with him earlier, and I know I'm going off
Yeah,
here,
no, no.
but it's interesting because he was talking about concussions. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking about how many concussions we have that we don't know, how many concussions we played sports,
Right.
we've had our head, you probably know that you got a concussion when you wake up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're in
Yep.
that, but there's little ones. But he went to Chicago. I'm doing the cliff notes here, but go listen to the episode, people, if you want to listen to this. But he went to Chicago, did a brain scan, and it showed his brain like, this is where you had a concussion, this is where you had a
Mm-hmm.
concussion, this, and they told him to go into a hyperbaric chamber, and he's had some uh, like it's helped his brain in that aspect. And where I'm going with this is, I think in this day and age, doctors only tell you certain amount of stuff. They don't tell you the whole amount of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to knock doctors, but I think there's doctors out there that are trying to. This is the problem, and there's doctors out there that are trying to fix the problem.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? This is
Mm-hmm.
what we can do, but there's other ones out there that are saying we can do more.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
They haven't even thought of the outside the
That,
box thing. This is
no.
where I'm going.
Yeah.
So,
No, 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 they had not. No. And this, so after 11 days, 11 days,
mm,
their recommendation was hospice care for a 19-year-old kid. And I believed them. I was like, well, I mean, you're talking the neuro team was there. I don't know any of these what they do, but they're medical people. They should be the
mm,
experts in this. And actually, Robert and I talked about it, and I'm like, well, Jackson wouldn't be like this for the rest of his life. So we actually, the plan originally was, I think this is what we're going to have to do, even though neither one of us really said it, but we just said, okay, maybe that's for the best. So we just did a lot of time just sitting and just looking at them, and then people would come in and they would still kind of interject, their thoughts of what. No one seemed very optimistic that Jackson was going to get out of this, that he was not going to wake up, and that end of life care was the best care for Jackson.
mm-hmm.
So there was a date that we said, okay, that's probably what we need to do then. So it was me and Robert and my daughter and Taylor came, our son, and I think grandparents were there, and we I remember it was a Monday because we talked about doing, that's the day we were gonna do it. We were just gonna take him off the ventilator.
And so you're all prepared for the worst.
So I was late. I'm always late, and
Yeah.
that day I was deliberately late.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
And I just was just like, I don't, I was just, obviously it was something I wasn't looking forward to doing. I mean, it was just, it was just a weird feeling. And I was just like, it seems wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's been 11 days and already they've given us absolutely no hope, or no one's come in to say, how about we try this? It was like, no, this kid, he's not getting better. So I'm walking into the hospital, and I am not a religious person, never have been, because Jackson wasn't baptized until after the accident.
Oh, really?
Yep. I mean, that's because when I'm like, I don't know what happens after we pass.
Well, yeah.
I mean, so Jackson was everything. He was baptized, confirmed, and anointed. So we did all that. I mean, we went as far as, I called the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
I called his friends and asked them about being pallbearers. We decided like where his service was going to be. Whitney and I actually went out and got our funeral outfits, and everything was just, it was awful. It
Well,
was just awful.
I believe
So
that.
that morning I'm walking up, and before Jackson went to SDSU, we kept going back and forth about what kind of car he wanted, and he
Mm.
felt like for a while there he was like, I want a purple Charger.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't need a purple Charger. And sitting outside of Vera Hospital that morning, it was a purple Charger,
Mm.
and I was like, what is this? What is this? And his favorite movie, one of his favorite movies, is Jaws. So walking down that sidewalk towards me is a guy that looks like Richard Dreyfuss from Jaws,
Really?
stocking hat and all.
Really? Did he swear at you?
I've
seen Jaws.
Yeah.
You know?
So when I get up there, so they're explaining to everybody in the room how this is going to happen.
Mhm.
That they're going to take him off the ventilator, and it could be minutes to days. And then just the whole process. So they're going to take him off the ventilator. They're going to take him off his feeding tube. And so I'm like, okay, they just stop everything, and then you just wait for him to die. I was like, well, that's not how they do it in the movies. I mean, they take him off and then they die.
Yeah.
It's not. So, and then I was sitting in the back. So, and then they specifically had a palliative care doctor there to go over this with us. And then, we're all just kind of sitting there, and it's quiet. And then that doctor says to me, turns around, and she's like, Mina, what are you feeling? And that's when I just bursted out bawling. And I was just, I mentioned the purple Charger, and I mentioned that guy outside that looked like Richard Dreyfuss. And I was like, this is just wrong. And I'm like, it's too soon.
Yes.
It is way too soon. And that was the day I was just like, because the other option was to do a tracheotomy and then do his feeding tube through his stomach, because everything was just going down his throat with this incubation. And I was like, I want him to have the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
I do. And they were like, oh, so I'm like, I'm sorry. And I felt like after that, so I remember that was the day I washed Jackson's hair. And I washed his hair and just spent more time with him, because I was just like, I just couldn't imagine not having him here. So, and we had this conversation several times because he just wasn't waking up even after that surgery. And then when he did wake up, they said it was his neurosturmings. So like he was like moving his arms, he was posturing. They kept telling me he's doing that because he's severely brain damaged. That's his brain damage. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But and then when he would do things, like he started looked like he was crying. Sometimes it looked like he was screaming. And they were like, nope, that's just his brain firing off. That's nothing. That's nothing. So, I mean, there was another time Robert and I were like, is this what his life is going to be like? It really came down to too. And now when people use that term quality of life, because I said to that doctor that day, I'm like, who am I to judge what someone else considers quality of life? I mean, if Jackson's going to be in a vegetated state, if that's his quality of life, then that's his quality of life. Who's to say that I should end that?
And because this interests me, and because what you're saying is, I kind of say, like, I want to do as many things as possible before I got old or anything like that. But how do we know? I mean, I assume you've talked to him, and he wouldn't remember anyway, but how do we know we aren't in those places of good places, even though we aren't talking to the movement or the crying, or, who knows what's going on in somebody's brain? Because we don't. And not that we're going to remember it all, but here's what I said. It's memories and moments over money for me, in the aspect that if I got into that state, I hope I have these memories going through my head of the good times, and of course, just life. And if you have more of the good times, I think that helps, and that gives hope.
Yeah.
because to me, hope is one of the biggest things in the world, because if you have hope, then anything's possible.
Yeah. And I was getting no sense of hope from any of these. So that night, the night before his surgery, a doctor came in and he said to me, "Are you making decisions by yourself?" I'm like, "No." And he's like, "You want to have this surgery?" I felt like it was they it was a waste of their time. That's how they were making me feel, that Jackson wasn't worth their time because he's just going to end up staying like he is. So, and I'm like, "No." So, and I was glad. I mean, so he had that surgery, and then I remember that night I regretted it so much because he was really, really reacting to his environment. I mean, the screaming, the crying. He yanked out his trach tube. I mean, it was just awful to watch. And I remember I apologized to him, like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Whew.
You're good, because we go through.
Yeah. I told myself, "Don't do that."
No.
But anyway, and then and then he had more days like that, more days. And then it was, gosh, what have we done? I mean, our poor son is miserable. He is in pain and he's miserable. And then so we're like, maybe we need to revisit, have that conversation with palliative care. And then that night is the night that a nurse called and said she was asking him to like stick out his tongue and things like that. And he did it. And he opened his eyes.
Really?
Yes. I mean, and Robert and I had both missed phone calls. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, Jackson died." And I wasn't there. And and then when I remember calling her back and she said that, and I was like, "Oh my gosh." So of course we both get over there as fast as we can, and then trying to get him to do anything, and he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And then the main doctor that comes in, he's like, "I don't know. I don't know." But at least he was the one, because he was the one who did the surgery. He's like, I'm just trying to figure out what combination of medication and what does he need. He goes, and I hope he proves us wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he proves us wrong. I'm like, I hope so too.
Mm-hmm.
So then it came a fight about him just being in the hospital because there's nothing else we can do for him. So they wanted to send him to a nursing home in Minnesota.
No.
Yes. And I was just like, I got a little crazy that day, and I think I spouted off something about calling some maybe news sources and stuff. And it came down to, because thank God I have insurance, and Jackson was a 19-year-old kid, so he was able to. An advocate came in and signed him up for Medicaid. Mm-hmm. So it was a fight between who's going to pay for things. Mm-hmm. How frustrating.
Yes, I hate that we, as a just being human, mm-hmm. saying you need to give up.
Right.
I mean, we can't do anything more for you. We'll sweep you under the rug, live the rest of your life the way it is. But I want to get back to, do you think, I mean, I don't know, maybe you know now, but do you think, like when he was uncomfortable, is that like a fever in the aspect, how you have a fever, mm-hmm. and then finally you start cooling down and then you get comfortable, or like he was getting used to that? Or
I really think, his brain was, it was firing off, but I think he was also waking up. He was waking up.
Yeah.
Because then after that, he would do more things. He would do more sticking out his tongue. And then it was the only reason they started doing things with him, like occupational therapy and physical therapy. Mm-hmm. Because we're at a month now. He's been just laying there. Mm-hmm. Actually, it's been like 42 days. Mm-hmm. Nothing's been done with him, and Medicaid won't approve things for him because he doesn't have any progress notes. I'm like, well, you guys aren't doing anything with him.
That's easy to see.
Yeah, that's easy to see. So then they started doing occupational therapy. And again, I felt like some of those people were just kind of coming in and just going through the motions because Jackson needed progress notes. Mm-hmm. Then he legitimately, after he got out of ICU, he got moved down to a floor. Then there was I remember I went home because I had a doctor's appointment. I wasn't feeling well. So it was Robert who was there, and he said they moved him to a different area, and he kept crying and he had a fever. And I was just, so what they found out was his feeding tube became dislodged.
No.
And they were like, of course he's screaming. He's in pain.
Exactly.
So he had to have another surgery
Oh, really?
to fix that. Yes. Then we were like, where did all that stuff go? Where did all that food go?
Gee.
And then, at some point we find out he has a tooth in his lung because he aspirated a tooth during the accident.
Oh, geez.
So, and then he gets pneumonia.
Oh, no.
And then he got it again.
Really?
Yeah. And that was, and palliative care, she came in and at one time and she was just like, basically, well, because the way she said it too, she's like, Jackson has pneumonia. I'm like, I know. And then, but she just let us know he's just going to keep getting infections. He's just going to keep getting this. And someday he's just going to succumb to this. And then I don't remember exactly what I said. She was like, are you ever really going to be able to let him go? That was such a bizarre question to me, but I was like, no, I'm never going to be ready.
No, nobody would be.
Yeah. But when he finally started getting infectious disease, that doctor, he ran so many tests. At some point, Jackson ended up having like 4 different bacterias running through him. And so they had to come up with a concoction of things. So on top of that, we're trying to get him off the respirator, but they're like, because she's like, it's my honest opinion, palliative care, that he will never breathe off a ventilator. Mm-hmm. And we're making referrals to Craig Hospital in Colorado and Madonna in Omaha, places that specialize in traumatic brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. Even though Jackson doesn't have a spinal cord injury, but he still, had a broken neck. But they won't take him because he's on a ventilator. So we're getting denied and denied and denied. And finally, because they did some things with him, I mean, towards the end there, at Avera, he was able to raise his eyebrows for yes and no. He was doing other things, even though the entire time his eyes were closed.
Really?
Yeah. Every once in a while, he would open them. Mm-hmm. And it was sometimes it kind of freaked me out. I'm like, oh, Jack's looking at me. Because we always just sat in his room and we played his music and, had pictures, just a couple pictures. And then he's just, after that phone call, I mean, he really started to wake up. And it was, so then finally on Halloween, October 27th, I think Vera was like, thank God this kid has been approved for different hospitals. We can get rid of her. We got to get that mom out of here.
So that was been a year, I mean, a little more than a year ago. But
so yesterday was the anniversary.
Well, a year ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That he moved to Select Hospital, which is a specialty hospital.
In Sioux Falls.
And it's a hospital within Sanford Hospital. Never even heard of it. That day, just to get him transported, because he's still on a ventilator. So to get him transported with everything hooked up to him from Avera to Sanford it took a while for them to get that. So, and then it was just, that environment was just so different. And then right away, this nurse, her name is Courtney, and everybody's dressed up for Halloween.
Yeah.
And I love that because Jackson's favorite holiday's always been Halloween.
Yeah.
And they were different. And I'm not saying that Avera was horrible to him. Yeah. They were just telling me, he's done.
Well, to me, you can be surgical, steel, or you can have a little compassion.
Yeah. And then I remember this Courtney. So we get Jackson in his room and he's making that face where looks like he's screaming or crying. And she was the first person who said to me, she goes, he's waking up, and she goes, he might be remembering stuff right now. Like, this is a reaction to maybe, things that he does remember, or he's confused. And I'm like, thank you. Because I've always thought, like, he is scared. He is hurt. He is, and no one was just, and I was just always given that. I can't tell you how many times I was told he doesn't feel anything. And all of that is just his brain responding.
Yeah.
Firing off.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. So then within a week, he was off a respirator.
No,
Yep.
a week.
A week.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
Just different
Yeah,
environment.
it was within a week. And I remember going, and I remember when they told me, so they did a breathing trial, and they were doing him at Avera because he could not be released from Avera until he had to be on this antibiotics because of his pneumonia for 10 days. So he finished that up. So they had to put everything on hold on Avera, like breathing trials. They did, I mean, they had him do some, but when they said they were going to do one right away, and I'm like, I'm, st- I'm still kind of going off of what Avera said, though. He's not going to breathe on his own. So, and then they did this breathing trial. And then the next thing you know, the breathing trial lasted all night. Then it was 24 hours. And then they just shut off the machine.
Really?
Yep. And that freaked me out, but I was so excited.
Were you there when they shut off the machine?
They did it.
They just did
it. They said, we're doing these trials, and it just happened. And I was just like, so then I was there though. So they had like a speaking valve. So the first, of course, I'm out trying to get him decorations for his room for Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I missed him talking for the first time.
Really?
Yeah. It was very, very faint, but they put a speaking valve on him.
Huh.
And then a few more days of that, and they took everything out and they just covered up that trach hole.
Really?
Yep. It was the weirdest thing. I was in the room for that. They just took it out and put a Band-Aid on it.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, that was bizarre.
That is bizarre. I mean, you just think they'd have to do a little more than that.
And I was just like, that's it. I'm like, he has this gaping hole in his neck. And they're like, yeah, I'll just close up.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So it did.
Huh.
And it did. And then they started doing swallowing tests because he was still on a feeding tube. They started doing swallowing tests with him. And then that was weird to watch. It was just giving him ice with blue dye to see where it went.
Yeah.
So he passed the swallowing test, and he was able to eat some like applesauce and mashed potatoes, and he was able to drink some orange juice. And then they start having him sit up. And he, after sitting there for 52 days, that's how long it was from the 9th to October 31st. I mean, his body, he was about 50 pounds lighter. He had no muscle tone. I mean, everything was just limp, and he was open, and he was opening his eyes, and I wasn't sure if he could see. So, and I was like, maybe no, he's blind. Who cares? I mean, but we found out later he could see. Yeah. So, but they started working with him, like I said, sitting up, and then just getting trying to work on those muscles. And then next thing I know, he was only there for 14 days.
Really?
Within 14 days, they did all that.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was, and it happened. And so the next thing I know, they had somebody from Craig Hospital came in to see Jackson and kind of like interview him, recruit him.
Really?
And she went through all his stuff, and they said from the moment that we made the referral, even though they denied him, they were still following him. They wanted to see what was going to happen with this kid. So they said, yep, waiting, of course, insurance approval.
Yeah.
So we got the insurance approval. Next thing you know, we're on a Learjet to Denver, Colorado.
Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then to Craig.
Yeah, that was the one in Craig.
Yeah, because there was a kid in town that he was on a mountain bike accident, and he was in Craig too.
Yeah, I read about him.
I've never been there, but that must be an impressive place.
Yeah, I mean, so that's where Christopher Reeve went.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, because I remember when we were packing up all Jackson's things out of his room, the crew they were so good, because I remember Jackson has this big, huge bear, and I'm like, can the bear go? And they're like, no. But she's like, you guys are going to a really good facility. And it was amazing. So we get there. So Jackson flies in in his hospital gown, and as soon as we get him, they showered him. They put him in his street clothes. It was just, and we're in this nice room, and it was just light and everything, and then doctor after doctor after doctor, and that day was just crazy.
Do they put him in the street clothes just to get a real life
I,
back into him?
I honestly don't know, but it was so nice to see.
Well, I bet that was as a mom too.
Yeah, it was.
But you think it would stimulate? I just don't have hospital gowns on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're sick and you're in sweats and
Mm-hmm.
all day for a few days, and I need to put on some real clothes.
Yeah.
You know how it makes you just feel better.
Yeah.
That's just amazing.
And and Jackson was still in that state where he doesn't remember any of this.
Yeah.
And I actually just had this conversation with him today about things that he remembers, and no, he doesn't remember any of that. So he had a neurosurgeon who was an amazing, and he had speech therapist, occupational therapist, physical therapist, a neuropsychologist, and they just had somebody, making sure after everything that he'd been through. It wasn't that long because one of his friends died, and that friend died next to him, and he was the first time he'd asked us about that friend when he woke up and he was. We said you were in an accident, and he had asked if everybody was okay. And the first time he brought it up was with Robert, and Robert just said, "Yeah, everyone's okay," because he's like, I didn't have the heart to tell him.
Yeah.
And then he brought it up again because he had another friend that was got killed on an accident, and so I was telling him about that classmate that got killed, and then he asked about his friend, and I told him.
Yeah.
And then the neuropsychologist said, "Man, you took a gamble with that." He's like, "You could have been telling, like a Groundhog Day, telling him every day that his friend passed away." But it was the thing I find interesting. So they do everything over with Jackson. They do an MRI. They do everything over. The MRIs are identical.
Really?
They're identical. And it's just amazing to me. And then the doctor said, we get these stories all the time where my kid was in a car accident. They said he's not going to make it. And, he's brain damaged beyond. And Craig is just like, basically, we're the experts.
Yeah.
And I find that, so after because we were at Craig for 90 days, and I just wish the non-experts would have reached out to the experts and say, hey, we have this kid, he's 19. We're recommending.
Well, what's interesting is when Deb told me that you probably would have a good story when we were talking about this, it was at Christmas time. And that's when I started to follow you.
Yeah.
And then I started watching the progress of Jackson.
Yeah.
And I'm not wanting to bother you at those times because there's things that are I don't want to bother people until they're either ready to tell the story or it's time to tell the story. And then you start seeing the progression because you were very good at keeping people updated.
So I kind of use Facebook as my therapy and also letting people at home, family and friends, know what was going on with Jackson. So
years ago they had the carrying bridge, but Facebook is I think it's better actually in the aspect that everybody can get to see it. And then people that haven't heard the story can at least go back and look at your story. They don't have to go to a website. They can just start scrolling.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
That was impressive to me. It was impressive how you kept people up to date. Because I think I remember, I'm probably skipping ahead here, but I remember when you said he took his first step and how joyful that was. I mean, we'll get to there, but so you're in Craig at Christmas time, and he just keeps on improving?
Yeah, he just kept on improving. I mean, so we were there for Thanksgiving because we flew out on that mid-November. And then, so we were there. It was just Jackson and I for Thanksgiving. And then every morning when you couldn't go till 7 and you could stay until 10. So I went at 7 and stayed until, and a lot of it was just sitting, especially, right around Thanksgiving. But every morning when I'd walk in the door, he would immediately start crying. Like every morning. And he started doing that at Select. And then, because to one point when the nurses called me and said, hey, Jackson wants you here. And I'm like, I'm right outside. And then that finally stopped around maybe January.
Really?
Yeah. It's like I think he was trying to figure out, like, where am I and what is
Mm-hmm.
happening and everything. His neuropsychologist said, I think we brought Jackson here too soon. He needed another month of just being in the hospital,
Mm-hmm.
just, letting healing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he should have came here.
Mm-hmm.
So he felt like they could have had more progress with Jackson if there wasn't such a rush to get him out. So, and, but then hearing that was disappointing because there was such a push. Just a push to get him out. But then he went to Omaha after that. So we got flown to Omaha where he was at QLI.
Was that's 3 months after? So you were there from Thanksgiving to Christmas to...
So his projected discharge date was Valentine's Day.
Really?
Yeah. But in that time, it was like a boot camp for him. It was good for him. Every day he was doing occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, and it'd be these hour-long sessions. So after just laying there for all those weeks, and they had him up, and then it was trying to get him to sit up and got him in a different chair, and making him talk. And he connected so well with some of his therapists there. We'd still keep in contact with some of them. But yeah, that first time when they have him in this apparatus that's hanging from the ceiling, just getting him to take those first couple steps was amazing. I remember the first time they actually had him stand, though, he was absolutely terrified.
Really?
And then I thought about that. I'm like, so he can't, because his left side is paralyzed. His left side wasn't moving at all when we were at Craig. And I can't imagine what that's like. I suppose he just felt like he was just going to fall, like he was just going to get dropped. And then I think when he felt safer and more comfortable, that got better.
Yeah.
Then they started doing like dry needling in his legs.
Really?
They did serial casting, where they put a cast on him, they stretched out his leg, put it in the position they wanted it, and just kept casting it over and over. And then they would measure it. And then they would do that again. And then they would, and just to the point, so they try to get his foot at an angle. So, because he just had drop foot. His feet just fell.
Huh.
So they did that.
Is that because of the paralyzation, or is that because of he was laying?
Just laying, yeah. It's probably a combination of both. So they did that. And then one day we were doing a vibration plate on his leg, and he kicked his leg up.
Really?
He just kicked it up. I was like, that was impressive. So then they started doing these FES bikes where they put all these little electrodes on him, and then the currents would move his left leg, and that was so cool. He would go biking, and then when they put him in this big, huge robotic machine, that was so cool to watch, and then actually see his body walking. So, and I think because he could actually, in front of him, the screen,
he could see himself.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
I bet that gives you motivation.
Oh, absolutely.
You can see yourself doing stuff.
Yeah.
I can do this.
Yeah. So, and then he would have days where he never said he was sad, but I think he'd just have days where like, I just don't like my body right now. And that's understandable. And I think he still gets that. But he's just, during that time, he was just so always willing to do anything they asked him to do. He never said no. Never said no. So, except for some food choices.
Well, I know that. I do that now.
Yeah. And then just when I thought he was coming home, they're like, hey, we got another recommendation. We think he should go to Omaha to this rehab facility. I remember I was like, no, I want him to come home. And coming home at that time was not where he needed to be.
Yeah.
So
how long? So then he left Craig?
We left Craig. We flew out on February 7th.
And then you went to Omaha.
Yep. So we flew to so Quality Living Independence is what it stands for. And he was there until July 24th. During that time, he's learned so many skills. Because the whole point is for him to be able to live independently again someday. Yep. He would like to go back to school. They had him, again, it was everyday therapies and everything. And they really worked on walking, climbing stairs, making your own sandwich. And at the end of the day, he got to sit in his recliner and play his video games. The thing that was frustrating for him too was two things. He had chipped teeth and he wanted to get those fixed. And he had been asking since Craig, can I get this fixed? So when that finally happened, he was very, very happy. Another thing was his vision. Like at Craig, when we first got there, he had double vision. And I didn't know that until later on. I'm like, oh, that has to be awful to have double vision.
Oh.
In his left, that one, he had a lazy eye. And then it started to, next thing I know, he was looking at me straight on. So, but he still had the double vision. And then he kept asking, I want an eye appointment. I want to get glasses. And they're like, nope, this is actually your brain injury. We got to give your brain more time to heal. That was frustrating to him. And I know then the left side of his body was frustrating because he's like, I just want to see and I just want to walk. And so just finally yesterday, he got new glasses.
Really?
He was finally able to have an eye exam 2 weeks ago. And the doctor, after going all his records and everything, because we were actually there for vision therapy, a referral because of his double vision. And he's like, got his vision to 20/20 again and said, I'm going to give his eyes a little bit more time and this may correct on its own. So we're hopeful that it will. So he was up until 2:00 this morning video gaming.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, so he's figured out how to game just with his right hand.
Really?
Yep.
That is good.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what he liked. So he's doing what, Jackson turned 20 in August, but he's doing what
kids do.
Kids do.
Because I think you figure those things out. We did 2 episodes. One with it's the armless archer.
Okay.
And he just won the Paralympics in archery, gold in Paris. He told us some stories about how he figured but you figure out things. I have another friend, actually, Dara Parker. I just did an episode with her, but we did it earlier. And her husband, Tommy, was in Afghanistan because the shrapnel he stepped on a landmine. If Tommy, you're listening to this, I'm sorry. But, and he had, it hit his femoral artery and they had to do a hip displacement on the side, and he's about here on the other side. But he just ran a race in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's just one of those things that you find ways to do things, and you can't just sit and say poor me when you can do that. And it's awesome to see that he's gaming and he has the motivation. This is where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get long-winded.
No.
But because there's Jackson and there's other people out there that when I'm saying is bad things can happen, but you can learn from those bad things and you can still live your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think he's finding out that a few weeks ago, his physical therapist asked him if he wanted a electric wheelchair. He was like, no, I do not. And then he did talk him into it because he said, Jackson, this is going to give you so much more independence. I mean, because having a manual chair, not being able to move his left arm and left hand, I mean, it's a lot.
Go in circles.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what happens. And so that's what happens. So he finally was, and then it was kind of cute because he's like, well, how are we going to get it around? I'm like, don't worry about that. Let me figure that out. And I think, so we should probably be getting that soon. I think that will be good for him. And like Jackson has the most amazing friends. I mean, that group of friends, kids from Stanley County. And then he has a group, a lot of his core friends are actually at SDSU. So they came down for his birthday we have a loft downtown Sioux Falls, because when we left Omaha, we decided to be in Sioux Falls. So I transferred to Sioux Falls so Jackson can get continued outpatient services in Sioux Falls, just because there was a little bit more option. And I mean, we've come so far. I mean, we got to keep going.
Oh, definitely.
So he gets Botox injections, just the combination of everything. He's lifting that left leg more and more. He's getting more movement. He feels his leg.
Really?
He feels his arm. So it's just getting his brain to connect, to get it to move. I think back that first time he took a couple steps with physical therapists at Craig just to do a couple steps in the harness and everything. They had to have a shopping cart in front of them. And it took one therapist in the back holding him and one on each leg just to move his feet. And now 2 weeks ago when he was at physical therapy, it's just him and a guy. And he has a harness. He has a cane that he uses. And then last week we actually called SDSU, and we're working on getting him back into school. Start with some online courses.
Yeah.
So
Well, good.
So I mean, and one of the cool things is, I still have contact with that palliative care doctor. So, and I remember the day Jackson left Avera. She did come down to see him off. Him and I remember she was just different that day. I mean, I think she was actually excited for Jackson.
Yeah.
So when we got to Select and just how quick everything went, they had asked, hey, could we use Jackson as an example of why hospitals should refer their patients to us?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I'm like, yeah. So we got pictures of him doing his physical therapy and the first time he was drinking out of his own. And I mean, just how quick everything was. And then they had asked for some other pictures, and I never got to see this presentation. I have no idea what they had. I do know that they used the picture of him sitting on the side of the bed with a therapist behind him. So the first hospital they go to was Avera to present this information, and in the room was that palliative care doctor and social worker. And we had just landed in Craig, and I'm in our room. Jackson's at his room, and I'm trying to unpack, and I get a phone call, and it's from Avera, and I'm like, yeah, I recognize that number. It's that doctor.
Yeah.
Then she was just like, oh my God, I just saw Jackson, and they told us about how they were there and they saw this presentation and how Jackson was drinking out of a cup and he was sitting on the edge of the bed. I guess she goes, and the social worker's name was Ashley. Ashley started bawling. She was there during every conversation where they were like, hospice care. He's never going to wake up. He's not going to survive these injuries.
Do you think that made an impact on them?
I hope so.
I hope it does too, because there are some doctors out there that you wonder why they became a doctor. If maybe it was a financial decision or something, I don't know, because I think there's other doctors out there, and I'm not saying them, I'm just saying that I think the ones that care or try to give you other ideas or choices, those are the ones, and give you hope.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I'm drawn to. In this day and age, I think we're getting more doctor. This is my opinion, but I think there's a hospital machine, and there's doctors that care, that are trying to give you other alternatives. Like, let's work on this direction, work on that direction, and let's see if we can improve this with that before we have to do this. And
right.
When you told me, I mean, I can't imagine being told. This is me too. Like, if it was me and they told me that my son was going to die, or we need to get him off, and he has no life after this, and then all these good things happened, like, I'm not. I don't hold grudges a lot, but I'd be driving by Avera with my middle finger, like, screw you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for thank you, but I'm glad I didn't give up.
Yes. Yep. And yes. So the social worker actually did say, she goes, I'm so happy for you, and I'm glad you put up your fight. And the doctor said, she goes, I can't explain this. She goes, how do you say? She goes, is it like a divine intervention? I said, or you were wrong. I mean, he needed more time.
Yeah. Because I can't believe
11 days.
I just can't believe 11 days after such a tragic accident.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say 11 days. How can anybody? Uh, how- a broken leg takes
Mm-hmm.
longer than 11
I mean,
days to heal up.
and that's why I was always amazed that they were just so willing to just be like, all right, that's, we've done all we can do.
Hmm.
So so one of the things that she had asked me, the doctor, she goes, do you mind if I share this information with Dr. So and so and that? And that was the neuro doctor who
Hmm.
went over the MRI. I said, yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I said, but the one doctor I want you to know, really talk to, is the doctor that did his surgery, his pagan trach surgery, the one who kept saying, I hope you prove us wrong and let him know that Jackson did.
Hmm.
So I hope she had let him know.
Hmm.
So, but I've had some emails with her just within the last couple months.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that
Yeah.
because it means they care,
Mm-hmm.
in that aspect. Because
And I hope the next time they have a young kid in this situation where he's in a vegetative state or a coma, he's not brain dead,
mhm, yeah,
give it some time.
because to me, if your brain's still working, there's always a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I understand if you're keeping a person alive and their brain is dead,
Right. Yeah.
then that's probably the option you would have to take.
If they would have came to us and said Jackson is brain dead, then it would have been a totally different outcome. All those arrangements that we made, we would have used, but that's not what they were saying. And I have a sister who is she's good at research. I'm coming off of this accident. My brother had just died 5 months before
Oh,
this
really?
of colorectal cancer. And I have a sister who was always like researching and everything until he was just like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that was because that was one of the things they were aware of too. When they had recommended hospice care for Jackson, they said, and I think they thought they were being kind, but they had let me know that the facility that my brother died at, they would use the other one. So I'm like, thank you.
Yeah,
I mean,
it doesn't matter at this
yeah,
point.
it was like when Jackson came home that on
Wasn't it?
September 9th
Oh,
or the 8th, I mean, September
yeah.
8th. I mean, I just had got done rearranging the living room and stuff. And because my brother was a hunter, and I'm like, oh, now I got to put this deer head in there. But so I put that up, and I noticed that whole side of the living room was just like a tribute to my brother.
Yeah.
And then Jackson's, and then it's like I stopped crying for Mike. So it kind of cut into all of our grieving for our
Hmm.
brother. Now we can kind of go back to that, as odd as that seems, but because Jackson's getting better and he's going to get better.
Yeah.
He's going to keep on improving.
Well, he will, and cause I believe that because I think there's options that we don't even know about right now
Mm-hmm.
that will come your way.
Yeah.
But didn't he come? Didn't he go to Fort Pierre in June or July?
So yeah,
How was that?
that was good. We actually had
It was early June, wasn't it?
Yep, it was in June 15th. He came back for that weekend because we weren't sure when he was going to come back.
Yeah.
In February,
Mm-hmm.
we were going to have this big welcome home party, and I had friends who had hired a band, actually Coldplay tribute band, because
Yeah.
he loves Coldplay. They were like, I guess we're going to Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
So they planned everything. They just set a date, and so they set this date, and then and everybody in Omaha, that facility, was like, that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. I mean, we'll do everything in our power so he can get to that party.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a welcome almost home party.
Yeah.
So, but it was cool. We had the band, and and then Pierre and Fort Pierre is great. They've been so supportive. Things that they've helped us with. I mean, I have an amazing ramp at my house now, and bathroom has been renovated for Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Fundraisers and things, so he can have those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I could, because maintaining a house and then a place in Denver and then Omaha, hotels and travel, and they've been absolutely great. So, and that was pretty cool. The coolest thing about that party, though, was I had reached out to Rick Cronin, and he's one of the firefighters that was there that night. And so he was able to get some of the first responders that were there that night. And that was super cool.
Well, that would be, to very few people get to see the end result of what
Yep.
has happened
Mm-hmm.
in a good manner.
Yeah. Yep.
And that is amazing.
Yeah. No, it was so good. I mean, Stanley County just had just an
It was,
awful year. They
it was,
had that house explosion with
yeah,
the one family, and then
yeah,
another kid
yeah.
died, and yeah, it was just awful.
It was a,
So for first responders, and they all said we needed this just as much as Jackson did.
hmm.
So that part was pretty cool.
And, and I think that gives them motivation. Like, things weren't good.
Mm-hmm.
The first 11 days aren't
Yeah.
good. And people probably are hearing this stuff, seeing it. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, but, and to be able to come home and see things are like, this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine is amazing to me.
It is.
Like you can be, today you could have 20% chance to live, and tomorrow you're walking around, because it is interesting in a lot of things. I've been lucky to do this, and Fiona Pierce was one of my friends. She also did an episode. This is funny that I go back here, but the story that she told us was she was the short part is it just happened that she was driving by this reservoir. They were going hunting, actually.
Okay.
This lady comes out wailing, says, "Does anybody know CPR?" She's from New Zealand. Her mom says, "Don't do CPR on anybody because you'll get sued because you're in America." You know what I
Sure.
mean,
Yep.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But she did it. There's 3 kids went down, and the car had went 20 feet into the reservoir. 2 had been pulled out. 1 had been underwater for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
She says, they were saying, "We're getting an ambulance." She says, "F the ambulance. Let's get it. You need a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter." She's doing CPR on him. She actually has a dot where her watch is. It was, she said, "I need to take off my watch. Let's switch just for a little bit." And so she knows the times of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, she has a dot on her skin where she was doing CPR. And then in 10 minutes, she thought she had a pulse. And then
Wow.
she thought she had a breath. So the helicopter comes in. She tells that to
Mm-hmm.
then it's whisk away.
Yep.
Done. And then I think it was 7 days later, she gets a call from the sheriff's department because, they said the family would like to meet you. 9 days later, the kid's running around like there's nothing that ever happened.
Hmm.
So those are the things, and not that she was a first responder there, because that's not what she
But
does, but those are the things that help a first responder in the aspect of
mm-hmm.
saying, you know what, this was a bad
Yeah.
situation, and now he's improving
Yes, he's improved so
significantly.
yes. All of them were surprised he made it to Sioux Falls.
Really?
All of them. I was actually.
And how I'm this is interesting to me, but how fast was the flight to Sioux Falls? And with a helicopter, how long does it take? Do you know?
They were there within. It was like from the airport in Pierre to Sioux Falls. It was like 35 minutes, 30
Really?
minutes. It was the actual flight
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, from place to place, yeah, they had everything done within an hour.
That
I
is
was. It
amazing.
was amazing, and they were like,
And to think they thought he wouldn't make it to
yep,
Sioux Falls in 30. Well, I
yep,
mean,
yep,
we'll say flight time,
yeah,
but an hour and 20
yeah.
minutes, we'll say.
Yep, and then to learn that they, put 3 units of blood in them.
Holy
I
moly!
mean, that had to be, which makes, then I was like, I don't understand why I can't, because I flew with my brother
Yeah,
before, so I'm like, I got to do that. Well, there was a
it
reason
was a.
that there was a lot going on, so and they needed to do their job,
Mhm.
so so they acted very very quick, so that was great.
So how did Jackson feel when he came back to Fort Pierre?
Oh, he was so excited to see everybody
Did you
and come
did you
home.
guys ride
Yep.
together and
So,
then?
yep. That first time he came back, actually, they had a staff person drive him
Oh, really?
because our ramp wasn't done yet,
Yeah,
and we were like, "What are we gonna do?" Because there's stairs to get in the house, and
yeah.
he can't walk. They actually worked on him climbing stairs so he could come home. So they had that staff person come and just help Jackson climb these stairs.
So did they? While he was there, did he say, "This would help out when he does come home"?
Mm-hmm.
like looked at your house and said, you might want to open up this
Yep.
doorway or that door. Oh,
Yeah, that we
interesting.
have, because had already done a lot of that. But yeah, I would send pictures to his occupational therapist, and she's like, okay, now he needs a grab bar here and he needs one here. They were like, and you need to get a bidet and all of these things that,
You don't think about.
you don't think about. Yep.
Mhm.
And then, so yeah, no, that was the first visit. And then we just started having a few more. And next thing you know, I honestly I had time, because we thought, how long is he going to be here? August,
Mhm.
September?
Mhm.
And then it was like, all right, Jackson's ready to come home. Oh, okay. So I picked him up on July 24th.
That is amazing.
And then he started his outpatient services on the 25th in Sioux Falls.
That is amazing. I know I jump from place to place, but it is amazing, like you were talking earlier about Pier Fort Pier or any little town, any little town really, because you're a family. I mean, and how people come out of the woodwork that you wouldn't even think about
Right.
coming out of the woodwork, and it is amazing how they're so supportive of the people that are around them, and I have to commend them.
Oh, yeah.
But how does it? Where did you find your strength through all this?
I think Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, his life, he was worth fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
No, we cry on their show
Yeah.
too, so don't worry about that. It's not about being tough, but
Yeah.
it's because. But here's the deal: to find the continued strength is amazing to me, because it's like sometimes there's that well, it has to be a roller coaster. You have
Oh, yeah.
energy here, and then you're like,
Yep.
oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Yep.
I'm wearing out. How do you keep from wearing out?
When I was, I don't know. I just, it was like, he needs me to be here and he can't have me be a basket case. I mean, he needs someone that has it together right now, especially in those early days, because after we just, made that decision, no, this is what we're going to do. And he's going to stay here with us. And when we moved on, and then I think what kept me going is, like I said, my brother had just died. So
Yeah.
that made my sisters and I a lot closer. I mean, close, but I mean, just like really close. Like, I have sisters that live in Colorado Springs. They were there every weekend.
Really?
They did. And so they would actually take me off campus every once in a while, just so we could go have a beer and laugh about some things and watch a game, just to get out of that environment. And I felt guilty about that at first, and I was like, oh, I don't think that's not right. And then I was okay with it after a while, because I did need to get away.
Well, you do for your own mental health. I think sometimes we feel guilty about it, but then we have to understand that if we're there continually and continually, we start wearing ourselves out, and we might have a short temper at times, or we're so tired we aren't giving what we need, and we need to take a day break or a 2-day break and then come back, because that actually is better for that other person too, I think.
Yeah.
So taking that little break there,
it is. It's
amazing.
important, because if you wear yourself out, then you can't be there for that person.
Because it probably took your sisters a day just to get to Craig, because there's always road construction between. I'm just kidding.
I remember that day, because it was just like I said, they get Jackson in that room and they're taking off his gown, and then I remember I opened the door and my sisters were there.
That is amazing.
Yeah, they came down all the time. So, and then people, when he was in Omaha, friends and family visited him in Omaha. So and he needs that. I mean,
but and it's amazing too, because Craig's a beautiful place too. I mean, at least you can step outside, breathe some fresh air, and look at your surroundings and go, at least we're in a pretty place.
Yeah. And I remember when he had 2 rooms. The first room faced a brick wall. And his neuropsychologist from the get-go was like, I'm going to get him a room with a window with a view.
Yeah.
And that happened. So, I mean, it's like, so you can see the mountains. So,
because we talk a lot about being in the woods helps our mental therapy because we think, we do, all this other, the things that we breathe in the fresh air, we clear our minds, we fill our souls. At least being able to look out the window gives you that hope.
Yep.
You try to use all of our senses is where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
So that's very cool. So I know Minnie would say a parent does that, but to find the continued strength over a year and 2-3 months here, that is amazing to keep that up and not, and like I said, I look at your posts and you keep us up to date. That is amazing and inspirational, and to keep on seeing the movement that he keeps on making, the improvements.
Yeah.
I always say it's like a step forward. You know what I mean? Yep. We're moving forward. Yeah. When I'm talking about improving. And so that is amazing. This has been a very awesome conversation.
Yeah, yes, it has.
And you didn't think this was going to be so great, did you?
I told myself I wasn't going to cry, though.
Well, you know what?
And I got to stop telling myself that, because it's okay to cry about it. I mean, that was like the worst experience of my life. That was the worst year of my life.
Well, I was about ready to cry a few times too. But don't worry about that.
So,
you got to. There are things that we need to let out. And when the thoughts hit you, you should let them out. We're good. We're good.
And then I think, but every once in a while, I mean, so if I go to do an update, but those old posts come up, and then I'll read some of them, and I'm like, just it brings back all those memories and stuff of everything that was happening last year at this time.
Because think of how far you've come.
Yeah.
And to me, it'd be tears of joy. Like, think of where we've came and where you could have been.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'd rather have the tears of joy than going to a cemetery.
Right.
Yep. Saying, I'm sorry I gave up on you.
Right.
But this is amazing.
Yeah. Because the anniversary of the accident, we went out to the cemetery so he could, pay respects to his friend. I mean, and we could have been in that same position. Yeah. And I thank God that we're not.
Yes. And you feel sad for everybody. And Fort Pierre had such bad, I don't know what bad luck last year is. Just terrible.
That 2023 was tough.
It was a tough year. And to have people, like we talked, it is amazing the number of people that stepped up where they needed to be stepped up in all those situations.
Yeah.
It is just amazing.
In every situation. Yep.
It wasn't like they favored anybody. It was like, holy smokes, we're having a bad year here, people.
Yeah.
And we're stepping up and being strong too.
Yeah.
And, but I have to thank you for being on, because you aren't dying rusty there for sure.
Yeah.
But at the end of every episode, we always ask the final question. And that's, what's the good life to Mina?
Right now?
Well, I mean, it's always ever changing.
Always, but right now it's being able to spend this time with Jackson, and then I've been trying to take some time for myself. So I realize that's super important. But yeah, it's having Jackson here and watching him, because he's kicking butt, and he's gonna keep proving those doctors wrong. And I can't wait. I'm looking for the day that he walks into a Vera and says, remember this kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would love to see that myself.
So that's what I want to see. But I think for me, it's just, people say you never know what tomorrow's going to bring. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can for myself and for Jackson and Taylor and Whitney, and everybody. And it's just you just never know. So just keep on living.
Yes.
Do good things.
Keep on letting the people know that you love, that you care, and keep on moving forward every day.
Every day. Yeah.
That's the best thing. Well, like I said, this has been, she's if you can't see this when we post this, but Mina came to the Don't Die Rusty Studios out here. Thank you for coming out here from Sioux Falls. It was just amazing, and we had a lot better conversation the last time because of the lag, and it was just those are not fun conversations to have because you're going, oh, this, you're waiting. But thank you so much, and thank you for inspiring people and inspiring me. And I know you inspired my sister and Sierra and Autumn too. So because they were watching this, and that's who brought up everything. So anyway, thank you for being on.
Thank you for. I just hope if it's a parent or a spouse, and if they hear this story and then they find themselves, and doctors are saying to say there's no hope, then no, there's hope.
Yeah,
there's hope.
Yeah. So don't die, Rusty Nation. Keep chasing your dreams, living your best life, and of course, don't die, Rusty. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Don't Die Rusty podcast with your hosts, Rick Hansen and Ricky Bruley. The Don't Die Rusty podcast is written and produced by Rick Hansen and Ricky Bruley. You can find us on Instagram and on Facebook at Don't Die Rusty. You can rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You might find your review read on a future episode. Got a question for the Ricks? Send us an email at don'tdierusty@gmail.com. It too could be featured on a future episode. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Don't Die Rusty podcast wherever fine podcasts are downloaded.